Daily Tech News Show is made possible by you, the listener. Thanks to all of you, including Dan Crafton, Tim Ashman, Johnny Hernandez, and you. On this episode of DTNS, yes, you can recycle EV batteries. Molly Wood explains. Plus, why Apple and NVIDIA suddenly want a piece of OpenAI. And would you pay $5 for a better Alexa from Amazon? How about $10? This is the Daily Tech News for Friday, August 30th, 2024. In Los Angeles, I'm Tom Merritt.
From Studio Animal House, I'm Sarah Lane.
In Oakland, California, I'm Molly Wood.
Drawn the top tech stories. In Cleveland, I'm Len Peralta.
And I'm the show's producer, Roger Chang.
Oh, my friends, do we have a show for you? We are going to explain things. I'm going to get smarter. You're going to get smarter. And, we'll all be better for it. And it'll be fun, too, I promise.
Tom?
It always is.
Why do I sound defensive?
It's funny. You're going to have fun regardless.
You just sit down and listen to the show, okay?
Tom is really, you're determined to sell this sucker.
Yeah.
I'm just like, you
Get
love
this
it.
pen.
This is a
All right,
men's warehouse of text podcasts.
You're going to like the way
You're
you
going to
look.
like the way you look or learn.
Let's
You're going to
start
like the way you learn.
with the cool. You're going to like the way you learn. I guarantee it. Starting with the quick hits.
I like that. Bloomberg sources say that Intel's executives have consulted with bankers on various options to resolve the company's financial situation, including the possibility of splitting the company into multiple companies. Meanwhile, Intel passed along the good news that its 13th and 14th gen mobile chips, aka the ones for laptops, are not susceptible to the voltage instability issues that many of other Intel chips have had. The company also says that the 13th and 14th desktop Gen i5 chips aren't part of the K-series, i3 chips, and Xeon chips affected either.
Ah, very nice. Microsoft Windows Recall is still only in the preview builds, don't worry, but it has made a lot of improvements since it was first announced. Its database is now encrypted. That's a thought. It's also optional. It's not default on. And German site Deskmodder just discovered a way to uninstall it completely in one of the latest builds of Windows 11. So if you don't want any option for everything you do to be recorded on your machine, you can just get rid of it entirely.
Months ago, Brazil Supreme Court Judge Alexander de Moraes ordered X to block certain accounts in the country for illegal posts of alleged hate speech and also fake news. X says those posts are not illegal and has refused to block them. X shut down its Brazilian headquarters as a result of this dispute. The judge had threatened to order X blocked in the country overall, but hasn't done that yet. In order to force X to pay fines related to the orders, the judge has now frozen Starlink's bank accounts. Starlink, like X, is owned by Elon Musk.
But they're different companies.
They are different companies.
Yeah. Sad news here. One of the most respected publications on the internet is shutting down. AnandTech, started by Anand Lal Shimpi in 1997, is no more. It's done as of today. Current editor Ryan Smith, who's worked at the publication for 19 years, wrote a post about the shutdown. Parent company Future's community team is going to maintain the forums, though, so you can still talk to other AnandTech folks. And the archives will stay up indefinitely. Future also publishes Tom's Hardware, so you can still get hardware news from Future there. And a few of AnandTech's writers have moved over there as well.
Mastercard is working with banks and payment providers to replace one-time passwords with passkeys. So, as a shopper, you can use your Mastercard account to pay without having to enter a credit card number or a password. The program is first launching in India.
Bring it here. I want to pay by passkey.
I know. Same.
The Wall Street Journal sources say Apple is in talks to invest in OpenAI during the next round of funding. Sarah told you about that yesterday. Bloomberg also reporting that NVIDIA has discussed investing in OpenAI this round. And of course, Microsoft might increase its stake in the company during this round. That seems like, that would be normal for them to consider that. Molly, I think a lot of people jump to a lot of conclusions about what this would mean when they hear this. Some of those conclusions might even be wrong. Can you help us understand what does it mean when a company like Apple or NVIDIA invests in a round of funding for a company like OpenAI?
It means I'm curious about the things that the conclusions that people would jump to that would be wrong, but well, either way, we'll just sort of try to talk about what it generally means. So when private companies are raising money at this stage, they are doing so in a way that is somewhat similar to public companies. They're selling shares. So they are selling some equity in the company. So Apple and NVIDIA have clearly decided that, especially in the case of Apple, it's like, well, I don't just want to be a customer of OpenAI by integrating ChatGPT and paying some kind of license fee. I also want to have some equity, a stake in the future of this company, so that one, if it goes on to make all the money that we think it's going to make, then we get a cut of that, which is great. And also, in some cases, if they take a big enough stake, like buy enough shares on the private market, it can mean that they get a seat on the board. And so they have some say into the direction of the company, which is likely what they also, I mean, fundamentally, to be clear, what Apple in particular wants, NVIDIA wants to, ensure an ongoing relationship and set of customers for its hardware. That's what they want out of that. And they just want to be part of the winner.
Yeah,
Which they see as OpenAI, and then Apple just doesn't want to hand it all over to Microsoft. They're like, we need to get at the table here.
Yeah, if your claws are in earlier, then you reap more financial awards.
Yeah, the financial reward stuff makes sense, right? Is there? I think a lot of people think. Yeah, a lot of people think they want to own it. Like, oh, they're trying to eventually take it over. How often is that the case?
I mean, currently, it depends on how much equity a company is willing to give its investors. In this case, Microsoft already owns 49% of OpenAI. So like, there's no universe in which Apple comes in and says, I'm going to buy 51. First of all, OpenAI would never sell them that much. Like, most likely Apple and NVIDIA are buying look, I'm spitballing here, right? I have no idea. I know that Microsoft has a huge ownership percentage rather. If Apple and NVIDIA are lucky, they're going to be able to buy 10%. And that is unlikely. And it depends. And just, you can sort of back out the math. I think we've determined the valuation here is $100 billion. So if they wanted to buy 10%, they'd have to put in $10 billion. That's
a lot.
Which is a lot of money, but also like they might decide it's completely worth it if OpenAI is willing to sell them that much. At that percentage, they would get a seat on the board.
And as we heard, both Microsoft and Apple were going to get advisory seats on the board, and then that fell through. So maybe this is a better way to do that. We're also dealing with the complexity of OpenAI being a nonprofit foundation, and the shares they're buying are in a subsidiary of that foundation. So that complicates matters. I don't even want to go that way. But how much influence do you get if you're such a small shareholder?
It depends on how much influence the company wants to give you. So if you buy enough equity, a big enough equity stake to get a seat on the board, then you have a pretty good amount of influence, because then in theory,
you're in the room. Yeah.
In theory, you have a good amount of influence. But, if you look at the way some of these tech boards are structured, like if you're on the board of SpaceX or on the board of, you got none.
Molly, I watch Succession. So it's like, if you're one seat on a 5-person board, can you really do anything?
You certainly can have influence. You can be a disruptive force. You can join with other board members. The main reason that you do it is to get information, and to get information early, so that you can either influence the direction if necessary, or just know what's coming. I mean, this is all moving so fast that the ability to buy into, even if you don't buy yourself a board seat, you can buy what's called information rights, which means they have to give you detailed financial updates early.
Aha. There we go.
You get that, and for that key clutch information about how much money they're making and what their business plan is, like way before. I was
always a little skeptical of this idea that, let's say NVIDIA buys, less than 1% of the shares, that somehow has a big effect on OpenAI buying NVIDIA stuff, which they're already buying. But if it gets NVIDIA some information, that allows it to tailor its strategy to make sure that OpenAI stays happy, and that's all above board. OpenAI knows they have that information, are going to use it that way. That makes sense to me.
Yeah, you get all. I mean, they open their books to you. You're an investor.
Yeah.
Like you get investor updates that are very detailed. And if you're on the board, you're literally, they're like, okay, we're thinking, we need you to approve this pay package, or we need you to improve this big move that we want to make to grow the business.
How they think. Yeah.
You know how they think. So yeah, if
Yeah.
you really want to be at the forefront of this from a money-making perspective, but also just no one knows how any of this is going to go. And so if you want the information in real time, you got to spend, $10 billion to get it.
Yeah. And that's a competitive advantage for Apple as well, which Microsoft has right now. So yeah, Wisdom in our YouTube chat is pointing out Microsoft's has got a profit share, which is different than its ownership. But I almost think that doesn't matter. Microsoft has $1 billion sunk into this thing, right? So it's just got a lot.
I mean, it is fascinating that Apple is going to be allowed to buy. This is really because OpenAI is like in theory sort of a separate company, but yes, okay, 49% profit share is. This is a Microsoft company.
Yeah.
So it's it's like
it goes into
Apple's trying to get in any way it can.
It goes into the complexity of how it's arranged, where Microsoft is also profit capped on how much profit it can extract, because this is ultimately owned by a nonprofit that is supposed to be improving the world and has a charter. So this is a little more complex than your normal like investing in a startup situation.
Yes.
But I think in the end, you have helped me understand that what Apple wants is information and a little bit of influence. Whether they get a board seat or not, board seat would be great. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. And we'll see if Apple and NVIDIA even invest. This is a report from Wall Street Journal and Bloomberg that they're talking about it. That doesn't mean they've signed a check yet either.
And it might be a long time before we find out. A lot of this stuff is pretty secretive too.
What we might find out as soon as October is a new Amazon Assistant. Reuters sources say that the new version of you-know-who, we'll call her A, codenamed Remarkable, might arrive as soon as October for between $5 and $10 per month. Yes, subscription service. The idea that Amazon's Assistant is going to be overhauled and that it might cost a subscription floated around already. So that's not really new. The newest rumor, though, is Anthropic's Claude is said to be providing the model for the improved voice assistant. Amazon reportedly decided against using an in-house model because there were latency issues. Basically, you ask a question, it takes a few seconds to get the answer back. Nobody wants that experience. It also may not run on all versions of Amazon devices that you might have in your home already. All right, everybody, I got a lot of questions. My first one is, I first of all, I have an Echo Show in my kitchen, and I have a couple of Sonos devices that use Amazon's Assistant for lots of stuff that I speak to, and also a lot of routines that go on in my home. It works for me. But as an Amazon Prime subscriber, I pay that, $130 now per year. How is that not going to be something that I get for free? I have to pay another subscription.
You're
on top
already
of
getting
this?
something for free, Sarah. You're getting the really crappy version that you have now. You want more? You got to pay for that.
And some people are like, oh, it's horrible. And I'm like, it's fine. I just know it can only do certain things, but
Well,
it
the
does
funny thing
them
is
well.
the crappy version isn't even, you don't even have to be a Prime subscriber to use it. Like, you just buy an Echo and
But
you get
that's
it,
why
right?
I'm like, but I am a Prime subscriber. And yes,
Right. Shouldn't you
over
get,
the
like,
course of a year, I
something?
do, I save money on toilet paper and all sorts of things, and I got
Yeah.
Prime Video and this and that. But for it to be, and again, this is just, what's being reported, for this to be something that I would pay on top of what I already, Amazon has its claws into me pretty bad already. I don't know what I would pay.
Yeah. There's no proof point is the other thing that I think is tricky, is like a lot of these services are coming out and wanting me to pay for stuff that just doesn't seem to have an obvious value. Like, to your point, Sarah, I've gotten used to the fact that A, well, we call her A, that A is limited, and that's fine. But I have no proof that by combining A with Claude, A is going to get any better. And so
Yeah.
I'm like, so then they're like, come along and pay for this. And I'm like, well, I don't know, because also Gemini wants me to pay and ChatGPT wants me to pay. And I'm like,
Okay, but this is an early rumor, right? This is Reuters sources. Let's say Amazon comes out and demonstrates in October, this is what you're going to get.
Which I
this
assume
is gonna,
they will.
Yeah,
There'll be
this
some
is
sort
what
of
it's going to be able to do.
Sure.
You know, watch this demo. You'll be impressed, and then you are impressed. Let's
I
say
watched the A demo and I was impressed too, and it can't do any of that.
Well, okay, so
but
in September
what I'm trying to
of
get
20
to
Yeah, I got it.
is, let's say you are impressed. And you're like, oh, okay, they showed me what it can do. Are you still willing to pay extra for it? Right.
I mean, Sarah asked the right question. What am I willing to pay for? What am I missing in my life that I would be willing to pay $5 to $10?
I feel like the answer is zero.
Amazon,
That's what I'm willing to pay.
Amazon has done
Zero
themselves
extra.
a disservice. You were paying for Prime for shipping. That's the way. And honestly, even at $130 a year, it's probably still a good deal for free shipping. We have just gotten used to the fact over the years that we're going to get free shipping all the time, right? So we don't value it anymore.
We're still paying
Right.
for it somehow.
right? And we're used to, when Amazon launches a thing, we get it as Prime subscribers for free,
Right.
right?
Then we
And
got the
Amazon's
movies
trying
and
to
the music.
unboil the frog now and say, you know what? That really does just pay for shipping. We're not going to keep making money if we just throw everything in Prime all the time.
Well, and
Well,
again,
okay, so
AI.
so
Sorry, go ahead.
how many times do we all have devices in our home? How many times have you been like, do this, and she's like, oh, sorry, I didn't get that, or whatever, and or you successfully give the prompt, you get the right response, or you trigger an action type thing, but then you have to start all over again every time. That's rudimentary. I know it. I know how to do it, but I do feel like sometimes I'm like, everyone, if other people are in my living room, quiet for a second, I have to do this again. If you could have more of like a if this then that experience with these home devices, that's where I think they'll sell like hotcakes, because
You
it's
got to spend $5 a month for that?
No,
Here's-
I want it
here-
bundled into Amazon Prime is what I want.
I will say that the thing that is a real problem for me wanting to upgrade an A device and pay for an extra service attached to that device is my phone. Because at
'Cause you've
this
got it.
point, when
right
A
there.
fails, I turn to my phone, which is always on me and is going to get smarter and smarter itself, like probably integrate ChatGPT, and then Siri is going to get smarter. And so the A already has a lot of in-home competition. And so the idea that there's something that they're going to add that I'm going to want to pay for, even if it was like more, I mean, the big promise for me with A was like the home integration, the smart home stuff.
Yeah.
That has just not come to pass in a usable way. Like, it is too, as a person who's like, I have limited bandwidth to install and operate all these things, I'm just like, it's not worth it.
I'd
pay them $10 a month if somebody came and set up my smart home.
All of my smart bulbs, everything runs through A.
Well, yeah, that's awesome. I just like don't have the bandwidth for the setup. And so even if they were like, for $10 a month, it's going to get so much better, I'd be like, oh yeah, but who's going to put it in my house? But like that stuff could be,
right.
I mean, if it included my, you know how like Xfinity tries to bundle like security services. I mean, I think it's just like, we're early enough in this evolution where it's just not, the value isn't proven enough. And there's so much competition for my $5 to $10 a month. I mean, I just started paying like $10 a month to join a book group. I'm like, I don't think A is giving me more value than my new Discord friend.
Yeah.
It's not my friend. Don't make that mistake. A is not your friend.
Can't put a price
A
on
is
that.
Definitely not your friend. Well, this was a story that was submitted on our subreddit. That's one of the reasons we're talking about it. What would you like to hear us talk about on the show? It's a great way to let us know. Head over to dailytechnewsshow.reddit.com. You can submit stories. You can vote on them. You can talk to each other. I'm in there commenting as well. Go check it out. dailytechnewsshow.reddit.com. A lot of people don't think EVs can help the climate crisis because the batteries are a source of increased waste. The argument goes like, well, sure, maybe they reduce emissions there, but then you got all these batteries in a landfill. Let's start with what's in a battery that would cause them to worry about this. Molly, what kind of stuff goes into your typical EV battery that makes people concerned?
Yeah, and in fact, I would add to that one, people are like, oh, these batteries are going to end up in landfill, and two, they themselves are super climate intensive to produce.
Production's a good point too.
So both of these things actually get to that, because batteries, a lithium ion battery also has a lot of other metals in it. And those can be the ones that are specific to EV batteries and grid storage batteries are called NMC batteries. And that stands for nickel, manganese, cobalt oxide. So nickel, manganese, and cobalt are the three metals in addition to lithium, which is actually, and then there's, so like, lithium LFP is the one that's lithium iron phosphate that's in long life batteries, but that aren't suitable for EVs and grid storage. So specifically, you have probably heard of cobalt in the context of the Democratic Republic of Congo. And that is a problematic source, and it's very hard to get cobalt, and there aren't that many sources. Nickel is far more abundant, but involves mining. And mining is messy and occasionally toxic, and sometimes happens in, countries where outside of the US where we may not have a lot of control, or there's unstable geopolitics. Manganese also same. It is abundant, but to get at it involves mining. So what's happened is that there has been this question of the sourcing on the front end, which right now happens primarily outside the US, and then has all of those considerations plus the environmental impact of just shipping a bunch of metal all over the world in order to make batteries. And then the second thing is what happens at end of life. Go ahead.
Yeah. So we have a problem of not only, this EV battery is done, toss it in a landfill, right? And maybe it poisons the groundwater or something, but also now we got to go make a new one, right?
Right.
And then you have to go through all of the things that you talked about there. If you could recycle, that's great. What inside an EV battery is recyclable?
Yeah. So the good news is, so you want sustainable battery production for all of the reasons, the sourcing and the recyclability. And the good news is that almost everything, right? Like, we are very familiar with the idea that metal is kind of infinitely recyclable, like aluminum over and over and over. So almost all of the things inside a battery are, in fact, all of the metals and metal components are recyclable. And the question for people has been, okay, but if you recycle it, is it as good as the original battery?
Purity and all of that sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And that's an engineering problem. And so, like, this week, this is coming up because this week on Everybody in the Pool, I talked to the CEO of a company called Ascend Elements, ASCEND, which is trying to create this circular economy for big high capacity batteries. And, it came out of research at Worcester Polytechnic Institute. Like, 3 professors were like, yeah, we made cathode material out of old cathode material that is just as energy dense and performs as well, if not better in some cases, than the stuff that's already being made.
So then it becomes a matter of, can you do it economically? Can you do it at a cost that's the same or cheaper than building a new battery and getting Congo cobalt and all of that? I mean, what do they think?
Well, so what's interesting is that as a starting place, so when you make batteries, it's the analogy that we used on the show is cookies, right? You're basically stamping out cookies, and you have a lot of waste.
Sugar cookies, like Christmas
sugar cookies.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay, I got you. Yeah. Right.
Yeah,
like your chrome cookies.
Right, no.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, you stamp the little Christmas tree, but then there's all the cookie dough around the edges that you don't use in the Christmas tree.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay,
cookie dough around the edges. And battery manufacturing plants produce a lot of waste, and they have a lot of waste material, and that by itself is, 1, economically inefficient. They're wasting useful metals. And 2, leads to waste and pollution. And so they actually need a way to get rid of that stuff. And so Ascend comes along, and other there are other battery recycling companies. I think Redwood is a big one. come along and buy that waste, scrap metal, effectively, and turn it into new battery material. And so that's like one way where it's just becoming a more sustainable manufacturing process. And then now that EVs have been, because I want to actually go back and address like one other myth, which is this idea that like, oh, it's in 2 or 3 years, much like my iPhone, my EV battery is going to be crap and I'm going to have to get rid of it and it might go in a landfill. That like doesn't happen.
No.
Like EV batteries are not like iPhone batteries. Yes, they degrade over time, but they degrade unbelievably incrementally comparatively. And even a battery that comes out of an EV after 10 years, which frankly, like by the time an EV battery organically has degraded to the point where it's just not useful anymore, the car around it will have fallen apart.
I can attest to this because you remember when I rolled up to CNET's parking lot with my 2-year-old Toyota Prius in 2004, 2005, right?
Yep.
Something like that. That is a battery from 2002, right? Like that is a very old battery. It's a battery for a hybrid. It's not a battery for an EV. That thing lasted until 2014.
Yep.
That one did. And they've gotten better at figuring out how to make them longer lasting. So that's a good point too.
So like if you've got a 300-mile, an EV with a 300-mile range right now, in 10 years, it might be a 200-mile range, which somebody will still be happy to buy. They'll be like, yeah, that's fine. And then worst case, you start to take them out. I think I've talked to startups who are working to sort of create a new supply chain for repurposing batteries. Like pretty soon you take one of those batteries that maybe only has a 100-mile range and you put it in a golf cart. Or you put it in a small boat and you electrify a boat that would otherwise have a small diesel motor. So there's sort of lots of ways to create this circularity. And then some batteries are truly coming off of the market that are spent. The other thing is they can harvest these materials from laptop batteries, from phone batteries.
Oh, right. Because it's still the same metal.
It's
just
still
metal.
A lot of the same metals and grid storage batteries. And so it's just like, because we now have had big high capacity batteries with this metal inside on the market for a long time, those are also coming out of service. And so so it just sort of gets kind of bigger and bigger. The economics are still in question. I don't want to act like they've totally solved this, but there are also, going to be incentives for it. And the car manufacturers, OEMs, are getting involved in this because it helps their environmental reporting, their sustainability goals. And also it's just like in the long term, it's going to be cheaper.
Yeah. So just remember, it's not like plastic where it changes when you recycle it. It's metal is metal. And those batteries last a lot longer than the one in your phone. Now everybody in our audience is going to be like, can I get an EV battery in my phone then? Because I would like my battery to last that long.
I mean, I also wouldn't mind like an NMC battery in my phone instead of an LFP battery in my phone. But yeah, like this is not, it's just sort of not, I don't know. It's so interesting to me the more I have looked into this, because I thought the same thing. And I was like, you should probably lease an EV because, the battery is going to degrade over time. No, in the span of your 3-year lease, like nothing's going to change about your range. Anyway, it's super interesting.
That's good
if you're a giant battery nerd, which I am.
Go listen to that interview on Everybody in the Pool this week as well. There's some more information in that. Before we leave here, though, let's check out the mailbag.
Let's do it. In another response to Roger's Patreon column on streaming, passing, other types of TV, George writes, well, I haven't had cable TV in 10 years. I've settled on Netflix, Max, and watching Blu-ray DVDs.
Oh, very nice. Well, if you want to watch something else, I suggest you watch Tom's Top 5. We have a new one every week. Roger and I produce them together. Roger does all the editing. I do all the talking. And this week, we're counting down the top 5 video game franchises older than you. Roger wrote this one up. None of them are actually older than me, but they're older than you. I guarantee it. You can catch it at Daily Tech News Show on TikTok, DTNS Pix, DTNS PIX on Instagram, and at youtube.com/Daily Tech News Show. Let's check in with Len Peralta, who has been drawing today's topics for us. Len, what have you drawn today?
Sometimes I get really inside baseball as far as what these images are. And I was looking over the show notes, and you were going to ask Molly a question. which was, Molly, what are EV batteries made of? And I saw it and I just grabbed it, and this is the image I created. It sounded like a like a children's book.
I love it.
So this is the beginner's guide to what the hell EV batteries are made of.
I love the subtitle the best. Molly,
The title is amazing.
what are EV batteries made of? The beginner's guide to what the hell EV batteries are made of. But now we got to write this.
So darling. And I love how it looks a little like mommy. Mommy, what are EV?
Yeah.
It's just,
That's the way my mind works. Anyway,
That's so good.
Yeah, if you'd want to get this image, you can go straight to my Patreon, patreon.com/Len at the DTNS level. You'll get it immediately, or go the old-fashioned way. Go to my online store, purchase it, hang it in your house, wherever you need to hang things, and it'll make a nice little, nice little gift too, possibly. So.
Mollywood, always good to have you on the show talking about batteries or talking about pretty much whatever. Let folks know where they can keep up with your latest.
you are the best. I am on Threads these days at Mollywood Pro, and everybodyinthepool.com is where you can find the podcast and the newsletter. We took a little summer break, and now we are back in the full swing of production. I'm just geeking out like crazy on climate tech solutions. It's up your alley. It's all tech.
Excellent. Also, real quick before we get out of here, BBC News, and thank Clinton for in the YouTube chat for tipping us off. BBC News says Brazil's Supreme Court has ordered the immediate and complete suspension of X in Brazil. So, in other words, ISPs have to stop it from being distributed.
Great job, Elon. You're crushing it.
Little extra bit to go on to that quick hit that that we mentioned earlier today.
Get it? Extra.
Hey, yeah.
Extra.
Delivered with such elan. Patrons, stick around for the extended show Good Day Internet. Roger made a quiz, and you can probably guess that it's about batteries, given the topic and Molly being here. But can you guess the answers? Aha! Stick around and play along with us.
Just a reminder, you can catch our show Monday through Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern. That is 2000 UTC. And you can find out more at dailytechnewsshow.com/live. We are off on Monday for the U.S. holiday. It's Labor Day, but we'll be back on Tuesday. Have a wonderful weekend and see y'all soon.
This week's episodes of Daily Tech News Show were created by the following people: host, producer, and writer Tom Merritt, host, producer, and writer Sarah Lane, executive producer and booker Roger Chang, producer, writer, and co-host Rob Dunwood, video producer Joe Kuntz, producer at large Anthony Lemos, Spanish language host, writer, and producer Dan Campos, science correspondent Dr. Nikki Ackermans, social media producer and moderator Zoe Detterding, our mods: Beatmaster, W. Scottis1, BioCow, Captain Kipper, Steve Guadarrama, Paul Reese, Matthew J. Stevens, aka Gadget Virtuoso, and J.D. Galloway. Mod and video hosting by Dan Christensen. Music and art provided by Martin Bell, Dan Luters, Mustafa A., Acast, and Len Peralta. Live art performed by Len Peralta. Acast ad support from Tatiana Matias. Patreon support from Tom McNeil. Contributors for this week's shows included Shannon Morse, Scott Johnson, Patrick Beja, and Molly Wood. And thanks to all the patrons who make the show possible.
This show is part of the Frog Pants Network. Get more at frogpants.com.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.